Welcome or welcome back to the CMO Summit. Before we get going with the next helping of inspiring content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this event to your screens. And don't forget, you can access even more content from articles and interviews to our podcast series at cmoalliance.io. Enjoy the next session.
Hey everyone, welcome to my session on my favorite branding and product marketing frameworks. I'm going to walk you through kind of how I think about telling the story of your brand or your product line, and a couple of frameworks that I've used over the course of my career, running brand and product marketing for today the Wanderlust Group, also companies like HubSpot, Performable, United Way, and give you a sense of, kind of more importantly than the frameworks, how you should choose the sort of right combination of structures to build the architecture of your story. So let's dive in. I'm sorry I couldn't do this live this week, but I am happy to have this recording that you can take along with you. All right, so brand and positioning frameworks. So oftentimes, if you are in product marketing or you're running a brand, maybe your CEO or somebody from the executive team will come to you and they will show you an ad that they really love, or they'll point to another brand that they really want to emulate. And they sort of start at the end, and it's your job to wind that back to the beginning and build the architecture that will get to that final advertisement or PR angle or content strategy that produced the work that they loved. And so, one of the most famous, best kind of product positioning, brand positioning examples of that creative kind of manifested is this classic 2006 Apple ad that compared a Mac to a PC and literally personified the brands and the differences between them. If you are too young to remember this, it went a little something like this. Justin Long on the right there is the very hip, very innovative Apple. And he is joined by the very stodgy, very traditionalist, very glitchy PC. And there are a series of commercials that he ran around, comparing these two. And they were funny commercials and they did really well. But this commercial wouldn't have existed if it weren't for really clear understanding of the two brands and how they differed in relation to one another, and where the competitive advantage was for Apple in rolling out this sort of strong innovators youth positioning. Another great example of an end product that started in great positioning. This is a manifesto full page ad by a company called Third Love. They were what I'll call a challenger brand that really went after Victoria's Secret in a very clear, pointed way, criticized the sort of leader in the market, Victoria's Secret, for being pretty exclusive in the sizings that they offered and in the people that they included in their Victoria's Secret runway show and their advertising, and really took a very confrontational counter positioning to the established brand that manifested in this large, very well spread full page ad. Shopify is a great example of a positioning that is really rooted in audience. They understand exactly who they're selling to, and they make their audience the independent business owner, the small business owner, the star of every one of their ads, quite literally. That is part of their positioning, and it's the most important part of their kind of full positioning structure. So these are the end results of good positioning, but how do we walk that back to true architecture for a brand? And what I'll argue is that you have to discover both who you are as a brand and what it is you stand for, right? Those two things are really important. And they're much more about location in the market than they are about locution of the way you explain that. We all get enamored with the words. I get enamored with the words, but the positioning matters a lot because it's what makes you memorable and repeatable and identifiable as your own brand. So you need to think about who you are as a brand and what it is you stand for, those 2 points. Now, if you don't have those 2 points, you can make missteps, right? So a number of years after this very successful run of ads by Apple with starring Justin Long, PC came back and actually hired Justin Long to switch sides and now represent them as their spokesperson to talk about, how it was all kind of a ruse and PC had evolved and PCs are now a better fit for people like him. The campaign, I don't have the hard numbers of it, but it didn't break through in the same way that this Apple ad broke through. And that was potentially because they were sort of trying to use another company's positioning to, and just sort of flip the product and the company underneath it. Another company tried to do this. You all may remember when the Verizon guy, the Can You Hear Me Now guy, switched sides and went over to Sprint. Again, made a lot of noise when he switched sides. But again, I think it proved that you can't just take the spokesperson and swap teams without actually addressing the fundamental positioning underneath that differentiates the brands. And so you sort of see this a couple of times. It's great for a gimmick, but it doesn't necessarily advance the brand's the brand's story in the market and an understanding of what it is that brand stands for and what makes them different. So great brands and great product marketing are built on great positioning. If I haven't underscored that enough, that is what I'm going for here. And what we're going to talk about is some frameworks to actually build that positioning. Now, positioning statement frameworks are nothing new. I'm sure you've got, one or two in your back pocket, but the problem is that too many positioning statements sort of start out like this. They are, giving you a very canned positioning statement that you're trying to shove your brand into. And what results is kind of like a clunky statement that isn't all that memorable and doesn't feel all that authentic to you as a brand. If I were, there with you right now, I would hopefully be able to get some nods on this, that you guys, we've all done this positioning statement, right? And it's not that there's anything inherently wrong with it. It's that this positioning statement in a vacuum is completely devoid of evidence from the market of where the company truly stands and what makes it special and what it is it's fighting for. And so, that's not positioning. That's Mad Libs. That's fill in the blank. That's literally a pop quiz that people try to memorize and then build messaging around. What I would suggest is that before you get to this, again, nothing wrong with this, but long before you get to this, I would ask that you first take a look at the market around you, and understand exactly where it is that you sit in that market. Understand the environment around your company, what's going on right now. Is it a time of a lot of change? Is it a pretty established market? Do you have is it a really crowded space? Are you the only one out there? All of these things will change not only the elements of your positioning statement, but which parts of it get most heavily emphasized. And so the idea that every single company can just have their version of this falls flat when it comes to building a remarkable brand. And yes, that means that if your positioning is a reflection of the market in which you sit, that positioning is going to evolve. That brand is going to evolve as the market evolves, as new players enter the field, as you get past new milestones as a company. And that's, I think, the really important thing about product marketing is that unlike other disciplines in marketing, and brand marketing is the same, unlike other disciplines in marketing that are a little bit more predictable, these disciplines need to be more dynamic. They need to shift and grow alongside the company and sort of match that evolution, all while hanging on to their roots. so that you're not creating just wildly different branding and positioning over time. So how do you do that? Well, first of all, if you fail to take your market into account, you could find yourself in an incredibly crowded space without a lot of differentiation. So this is sort of happening right now in the like quick commerce space. There's a lot of little delivery services out there that are all promising to get you, whatever it is you need in under 15 minutes. And if you look at this list, it's kind of hard to tell one brand from another. I sort of GoPuff and Getir are kind of, they stand out to me, but I sort of couldn't point to why they're different. I apologize if any of you are from those brands. All of this is a process and we're going to get there. But I think if you don't understand, hey, I'm Flink, I'm starting out in an already very saturated market. How am I going to differentiate from this space? And how am I going to pull people to me around a point of view that I stand for? It's hard. You get stuck in this murky middle. So that's risk number one. Risk number two is if you fail to adapt as the market shifts, you could end up here. You could end up where Abercrombie and Fitch ended up, or where Victoria's Secret ended up, where they have these horrible rise and fall articles written about them because they failed to recognize that the market around them was shifting, public perception was shifting, and messaging that worked for them at one point, at best, no longer worked for them. At worst, reflected a very sort of problematic culture and underpinning of the brand. So you don't want either of those things, right? So how do we get to a place where our position is clear, it's well articulated, and it's well liked and followed in the space? So I would argue we need to start with this one question: where are you in the market? Are you a pioneer brand, as in there's nobody else out there, you're the first company of your kind and you've got no competitors? Or are you a challenger brand? You're coming up as the underdog when there's already an established leader in the space. You got to answer that question. Where are you on that spectrum? And it may not be all the way over to one side or the other. It may be somewhere in the middle. How crowded is that market? Is there a lot of noise, like in the quick commerce space, or is there a clear winner, for example? And where you are in that spectrum is going to determine what you need to do for positioning and for your sort of brand story. And finally, how mature is the market? Is this an emerging market that really needs to be defined? In which case, you're going to want to spend a lot of time on marketing the market and the need for it. A lot of people call this category creation. You are going to spend a disproportionate amount of time on establishing that market and the pain points within it and the need. Whereas if you're an established market, you don't need to spend that much time doing that. The parameters are already known, the pain points are already known, the feature sets are already known. You just need to differentiate within it. And so all of these things will sort of swing what the building blocks are for your brand and for your product positioning. And so once you understand that, where you are in the market, then you have to ask the question, okay, well, why am I here? What is it about the market that necessitates me joining it that wasn't solved by all the other players? So that's our next question. But first, let's solve that problem of where you are in the market. And I've exchanged an AdLib or a Mad Libs equation for a sort of decision tree, which I know is not much better, but I think it does help us kind of get a framing. So I would sit down with your company and ask yourself, okay, simple questions. How mature is our market? Is it emerging or is it established? If it's emerging, you're probably going to be a category creator, and there's a set of positioning that you need for this market. If it's an established market, there've been competitors in the space, people, it's really clear what it is that the market needs to do. Then the next question is, well, are you the dominant leader in that space already? If not, you're probably a challenger brand, and that will inform your positioning and your brand, the way you talk about yourself and what you stand for. If yes, then you're the market leader. That's a little bit more of a defensive place to be. And different product marketers and different brand marketers are really good at different types of companies. And you want to make sure that you're hiring product marketers and brand marketers that fit this style company. Because again, if you get somebody who's really good at being a challenger brand and you sit them in a market leader and they've got no one to fight, it's going to be an uncomfortable situation for them. And then finally, there are circumstances where there are no dominant leaders in the market, where it really is like quick commerce or even car dealerships or car manufacturers, where there's just a smorgasbord of different players in the market and no one has a really clear dominance. Then your brand positioning should really be about how do you zero in on a segment of that market that you can truly own. And how do you make your positioning about them and about understanding their pain? So I would go through this exercise. This is one of my favorite frameworks to figure out when I'm first sizing up a company, even when I'm sizing up a company to join them, what type of brand are they? And then again, that informs how we talk about their place in the market and what it is they're fighting for. So I'm going to start with the market leader positioning, because this is actually the most similar to the old canned positioning statement that many of us know. So you want to identify, who inherent in here is you want to identify the audience you're speaking to. You want to talk about the problem that they have, why that problem is bad, the solution that you're offering, and then the proof points of why your solution is the best. And this could be data. This could be really like, big name customers that you have that are recognizable. There could be social proof in that. And then finally, sort of a call to action for why somebody would want to choose your company to solve that problem. In market leader positioning, you're going to want to cover all these things, but you're going to put the greatest emphasis on your proof points. The reason why you are the market leader, you want to keep reminding people. And again, that could be showing results. That could be, hey, look at all of these big, great brands that trust us. That's where your emphasis should be if you're a market leader, because it's a little bit of a defensive place to be. It's great. The view is nice from the top, but you need to maintain it. And to do that, you can't give people a reason to question your brand. You have to show that you are not only the leader, but you're growing and you're innovating and that you're adding new value all the time. If you are the upstart, if you're in the challenger brand position, that really changes where you focus. So again, the ingredients aren't that different. You're going to talk about the problem that you solve, but very importantly, you're going to talk about why the traditional approach to solving that problem is fundamentally broken. And ergo, by doing that, you are knocking the leader, because the leader had the chance to solve that problem and they didn't do it. So what did they do wrong, right? Then you talk about why your approach is different, why that matters, and the call to action to choose your brand. In a challenger brand positioning, you're going to talk about all these things. The emphasis needs to be on what's broken about the market leader or the way that companies have traditionally solved this. And where you fall and how aggressive you want to be on that, if you want to straight up call out Victoria's Secret, if you're third love, or if you want to talk more generally about how, traditional cybersecurity companies have approached the problem this way, but that's not sufficient. And here's why our approach is different. You can do it more generally too. It depends on your appetite as a brand for going after a leader. And also that can be informed by how dominant they are, right? If they define the market, you probably want to go after them. If they're sort of a couple of leaders up there, then you might want to talk in more general terms. But the point here is, whereas the market leader is talking about the credit that they've earned to be on top and all the proof and why they're the obvious choice, you want to create that wedge of where they've gone wrong. And so your emphasis is going to be on a broken approach, why the traditional approach is broken and why yours is different. Focus on the differentiation. Now, if you are a category creator, you're not going to have a lot of competitors to compare against. You are going to be the first going after this category. What you're basically spending all of your time on is talking about change, talking about the need for a new category to emerge. And so a category creation positioning is really tied to this concept that the world is changing around us, and that there's a need for a new kind of company, a new kind of solution, and that we are leading the charge there. And so your positioning block, ingredients will be, again, audience is implied here, but the world is changing. What was the old way of doing things? Why is that no longer sufficient? What's the new way that you're ushering in? Why is that better? And a call to action. This is less about your competitors and more about the need to fundamentally change the way that your consumer does something, whether that's the way they operate as a business, if you're selling into B2B, or if it's the way that they approach weight loss, if you're selling into a consumer product. I like to position this one as more of a narrative and less of like a positioning block. So I thought I would offer this up here as well. I think about this in terms of like, you're telling a story. There's the old way, the established way, the status quo, and then there's something that changed about the world that necessitated a change. And then there is an advantage that early movers will gain by adapting fast to that change. And your company can help as the leader of ushering in that new world. The final category here is if you're in a crowded space and there's not really a clear leader. It's great if you can somehow create positioning that will sweep up all of the entirety of the market. But what you might need to do is actually sort of like secure a few segments by speaking directly to them and really locking them in and then expanding. So if you think about like in the car space, Subaru is going after a very specific segment of car buyer, and that segment is very different than Ford. And so they are not necessarily competing head to head like a challenger brand would be, but they're each going after a portion of the market, and then they would expand as they've secured that portion, theoretically. So in this type of positioning, you're really going to want to, again, you're going to have the audience, their pain, why you fit them best, proof points. A lot of these are like similar ingredients that are sort of rearranged slightly. But if you are in a crowded market, there's no clear leader, there's a lot of noise. What you probably want to start to do is really focus on the audience that you're going after first. What sliver of that market are you going to wholly own, and make sure that they know that that you are speaking to them and speaking for them and fighting for them. And then again, that's a chapter of your development as a company. You'll need to expand beyond that, but the audience is key if you're trying to be the segment's choice. Okay, so looking at this again, this sort of brings us down to where is your current place in the market, right? And what's your best position competitively against your peers if there are peers in that space? And each of those has a different type of architecture that can build up the positioning for it. So that's who you are. Let's talk about what you stand for. So if you are a category creator, then what you're largely saying is, hey, the world is changing, and you're pointing to the larger shift that is happening in the industry or the space around you. So a good example of that is when HubSpot first started, they saw that a lot of the marketing tactics that their peers were doing were just not working anymore because people had adopted ad blockers or they'd gotten on do not call lists. And so they really saw like a shift that was happening in the space, and they leaned into that change, and they became a category creator in their early days to invent what they called inbound marketing, which is a new kind of marketing. Now, that was the first chapter in HubSpot's life as a company. Since then, they've gone on to expand into a multi-product company, a full-throated, one of the most popular CRM companies out there, but that's where they started as a category creator. If you are a challenger brand, what do you stand for? Well, what you're basically saying is there is a problematic leader, and we stand as an alternative to that problematic leader, right? And it could be something principled, like with their Love and Victoria's Secret, or it could be something really practical, that problematic leader has not evolved with the times, that they are stodgy, that they are old, as Apple was trying to do to PC. But the point is that you are positioning against that leader, and you are sort of by nature standing against them as your positioning. For market leaders, what you stand for is solving problems. You're great at the problem that you chose to solve. You rightfully earned the market leadership position. You've got great customers, great proof points. So really what you're standing for is continuing to solve those problems that are faced by many, and make a difference in the lives of those people or those companies. And finally, if you're really focused on a segment, it's a crowded space, you're trying to carve off the portion of it that you can. It's really important to center on the audience, and what you stand for at that point is you stand for that audience. We understand you better than any other company understands you. We fight for you, we build for you. Everything that we do is reflective of our understanding of who you are. So these are slight differences, but you can kind of see how if you are a market leader choosing a segment approach or a challenger approach, it's going to be problematic for you. If you're a challenger brand, you're going to have a hard time establishing a voice if you're going with market leader positioning, right? And so even these slight changes make a big difference in where you are, and can give you that competitive angle that you need to stand out. Now, I talked about how this has to evolve, right? So what are signs that your positioning, both either brand or product level, need to evolve? Well, for category creators, that change happens when the new category that you've created becomes established, when other players start entering it, when the problem set or the feature set that you put forward is the default, right? Then you might move from a category creator to a market leader, right? And you need to adjust your positioning to fit that. For a challenger brand, your world changes when your problematic leader falls or when you beat them at their own game. And then you can't really position against them anymore. You can't stand against them because you are the new de facto leader. And so you move from a challenger brand to a market leader, and you need to change your positioning yet again. Or maybe you decide to then expand and enter a new category and be a category creator, but you're no longer in that challenger spot. If you're the market leader, the biggest sign that you need to change your positioning is that the market shifts. Suddenly what you were leading is not as big of a market anymore, or it's what your solutions don't work the same way that they used to, or your competitors gain on you, right? And suddenly when there was a ton of airspace between you and the nearest competitor, it's gotten a lot more crowded at the top. And so then you need to revisit your positioning and figure out a new storyline that is connected to your history, but will help you get to that next chapter. And then finally, if a good sign, if you're kind of in the segment's choice bucket, is if you saturate that market, then you're going to need to find a way to maintain the sort of connection you've made with those super fans of you within that segment, but also expand to other segments so that you can take on more and more of that market, and do so in a way that that's not disruptive to your existing audience, right? And there's all sorts of companies that have successfully done this. There are also companies that have struggled at this. And so lots of case studies there. But that's kind of what I would look for is, who am I at the very top there? What do I stand for as a company or a brand in the middle there? And then what are my indications that it may be time to shift and to sort of reevaluate and evolve that positioning over time. So that's my pitch for some of my favorite positioning frameworks. I think the big underlying thing that I will leave you all with is, like, just do not be overly reliant on cookie cutter positioning statements, and definitely don't have that work untethered to where you are in the market. It's right there in the name. Positioning is about your conceptual location. How close are you to a competitor? How crowded is that space? How new is the market? And if you don't understand those things, you're going to end up creating positioning that just sort of falls shallow, and doesn't sort of reflect the authentic uniqueness about your company in that space. So thank you all very much for listening. I'm Megan Keeney Anderson, CMO of the Wanderlust Group. You can find me on Twitter at Meg Keeney with the H in there. And I'm happy to do any follow-up with all of you. Thanks for attending the summit.